Hi, warriors. This is Jaylyn Megahead, my legal warrior. And I wanted to make this segment about removing somebody from their residence. So, the only situation that would actually take place is in a restraining order. So, if you're requesting a domestic violence restraining order, you can actually request that the other party is removed from the residence. But you can't just request it just because you don't want them in the residence anymore. It really is fact specific. So if the facts are more along the lines of harassment, intimidation, that sort of thing, then the court is may or may not, but unlikely to issue an order for removal from residence. This order, again, is only granted in the context of a restraining order. Outside of that, the court doesn't generally grant those things. In fact, the alternative is the exclusive use and possession of a residence, and that is typically on a temporary basis. But the only time that you would request that is, again, when you're going through a divorce and there's a reason as to why you need exclusive use and possession of a certain property, such as a residence, and ordering the other party to still contribute to that residence, the maintenance of that residence, whether it's a mortgage or rent or utilities, those sort of things. Especially if you have kids, then that could be something that the court actually will allow, is to have exclusive use and possession of the residence. However, if you are not amicable with the other party and they unfortunately hit you, or if you hit the other party or physically abuse them in some way, that is very easy for the court to go ahead and grant the order for removal from the residence. And so the effects of that, especially if you have kids, is you already have to stay 100 yards away from the residence. You'd have to stay 100 yards away from your kids. Your kids are likely going to be protected under a restraining order, and you are not going to be able to contact them unless there's an exception to that the judge gave you. And typically moving parties or the people that are requesting for a restraining order doesn't allow for that exception. So you might be indefinitely not seeing your kids, not living with your kids. So in those sort of circumstances, you really have to, think about the consequences of your action. And somebody that has been subjected to that sort of abuse is certainly deserving to be protected so that that abuse comes to a halt, because the purpose of a restraining order is to not have the same repetitive behavior occur over and over again. So repetitive abusive behaviors. So it's deter and prevent this happening in the future. And typically it would be 3 weeks from the time that you file. However, with the courts being closed until further notice, even though they say they're going to be open on April 3rd, but I think it's going to be longer than that. You might not be in the house anytime soon. You might not see your kids anytime soon. So this is definitely a time to stay, amicable, and definitely not have any abusive tendencies or behaviors. And if you're kind of if you feel like the other party really can't control themselves, but you really don't want to file for the restraining order because you want to remove them from the residence and they have no place to go because of the coronavirus, and you guys have kids together, you should try and convince the other party to go to some sort of intervention, whether it's anger management or a parenting class or individual therapy. All of these resources can actually be used online, even with a phone call. So it's not unheard of, especially now with the virus keeping us all in our homes. But if that's something that you can't be around this other person because they've physically abused you, and rightfully so, then they should leave. And don't be afraid to do that. Don't be afraid to exercise your rights to protect yourself as well as your kids and whoever else is living in that residence. And some individuals are like, well, you know, she or he didn't do anything to my children, and so I'm not going to include them on the restraining order. And maybe the kids saw that, the abuse, when I refer to that, the abuse. And so the exposure is most of the time enough to protect the kids, because that's just showing abusive tendencies, and the court doesn't want the kids to be exposed to abuse, period. It's detrimental to children. Now, to remove somebody from the residence, there's a proposed form that must be in your restraining order packet, your request for a restraining order packet, in order for the court to go ahead and grant it. And I'm going to show you the form. So this is the form that you would have to make sure that it's inside your packet for the restraining order. So it says order for removal from residence. The sheriff is actually going to be the one that takes this order and is going to go to the residence that's listed right here and tell the person that's listed right here that they need to leave the house. They need to leave the residence, whether it's an apartment or a house, it doesn't matter. They will be removed from the residence, whether it's going to be voluntarily or, you know, in handcuffs, essentially. So the court does, however, allow that the person here, the one that needs the abuser, the person that's listed here, to remain on the premises for a reasonable amount of time in order for them to remove personal effects from the residence. So personal effects are like clothing or, you know, their car keys, you know, some of maybe their work material if they work from home, especially right now if people are working from home, so their computer, you know, cameras, whatever it might be, in order for them to not make them come back to the residence. And there's always, you know, a time where you might actually hear from the other party that they do want to come back and grab stuff. And hopefully you're not hearing it directly from the other party. But it is, you know, it's actually inappropriate to even communicate that. But if it's an essential or a need that somebody just forgot at the residence, and they're not using it to contact you, and they just really need this one thing, then they should go through an indirect means. But it's always best to be, you know, safer rather than sorry. They shouldn't contact you whatsoever. That is a violation of the restraining order, especially if the restraining order doesn't allow for that sort of communication. And if they forgot it, oh well, they're gonna have to wait until the hearing. So that is how you use this order for removal from residence in a restraining order capacity. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing that. The other thing that I wanted to just briefly touch on for the restraining order and the order for removal from residence is that, you know, especially when you have, you know, kids and the other parent is not necessarily at the residence anymore, and so you're going to need to be able to explain that to your children. And I'm a huge advocate of, you know, therapy and just getting education and resources to help you provide that explanation and provide those resources, or to provide that information also to your kids, so it's done in a more diligent way. And if you are a victim of domestic violence, you know, please don't be afraid to get help. Don't be afraid to remove the other party from the residence because they might do something worse to you. You really never know what's happening, you know, around the corner, what's happening in their minds. I'm sure you would have never imagined that they would lay their hands on you. And when you do, you got to take action, and you have to really do what's best, especially if you have children, what's best for those kids. And although it's best to have, you know, everybody under one house, and mom and dad are living together. But when you're in a situation where it's an abusive environment, that's not best. And I would encourage you to contact a therapist, a coach, somebody who can actually assist you through this hard time in your life, because it is difficult. There's no need to downplay it or to hide your feelings or anything like that. You need to actually just, you know, own up to it and don't let it take control, you know, of your life. And so just wanted to add that little tidbit there. It's obviously not my professional opinion because I don't work in therapy or in the science realm, but it's always devastating to see how abusive relationships really takes control over a client of mine, or any individual out there. So, you know, protect your kids, protect yourself, protect your mind, and have a peace of mind, and really just worry about number one, which is you and your kids. And if you're not safe and healthy and happy, then your kids are going to see that, and then that kind of pours over to the children as well. So we hope that you share this video if you found it helpful. Even if you didn't find it helpful, somebody that you know might be needing this information, and the only way for them to get this information is for you to share it. So we really hope that you take the time to just click and share it with your friends and family on Instagram, Facebook, email, whatever way you want to go ahead and send it. There's so many different ways of sending things right now, especially with the coronavirus, just, you know, keeping us all in lockdown. But I really do pray that you do share it. And we hope that you are safe and that you're well and that you have a good day. Thank you.